This video will cover classifications and how they're helpful, especially when working with schedules. Classifications can be used to easily filter objects in or out of a schedule. An example is when you're doing an addition or renovation project and a good part of the building is existing to remain or existing to be demolished. On the other hand, there's always components of the project that are new, because otherwise we wouldn't be doing drawings to begin with, probably. This is a very important ability to be able to filter what's included in a schedule, because generally speaking, you don't show existing objects in a door schedule or a wall schedule or a window schedule, because the schedule is intended to show the scope of work of what has to be completed in the project at hand, which would mean the new doors, the new walls, the new windows, etc. So in this little example, I have the blue walls kind of creating an existing garage. So there's an existing garage door and an existing swing door to get access in and out. On the other hand, on the left side, I have new walls added on, perhaps a storage room on the side of the garage with two new doors being added. So when the construction documents are completed for this project, there should be only two doors included, not four. So you can see how there's four doors included here in the schedule. So that's a problem. And the bottom doors show up just with question marks because these existing doors have not been tagged, meaning there's no property set data assigned to them. Now, the first thing to remember is you do have the ability with the schedule to add or remove scheduled objects. So in this particular case, I could actually just remove the doors that don't need to be included. That's an important part to keep in mind when you're creating the schedule to begin with. You have the option to select which objects are included. So again, door schedule, and then it asks you to select objects. So I could have only picked these two doors, and then I wouldn't have an issue. The problem is that most firms use external references, and if this was an external referenced plan, the plan is only one object. It's not going to have a bunch of different doors to select. So you select the plan as one object, and then it includes all the doors. So then what do? How do we get the existing doors to not show up in the schedule? Well, that's when you can start to use classifications to filter what's included or not included. And that's an easy way to do that. You have to kind of have an overall picture in mind in terms of file structure and CAD management. What do I mean by that? Generally speaking, you'd want to have a door style that relates to existing doors, and then a door style that relates to new doors. And there's a couple of reasons. One is so that the classifications can be assigned differently, so that layer keys can be assigned differently. And then you also might want the graphics of the door themselves to look different in terms of line weight, perhaps in terms of a level of detail. So you kind of set up your styles to work based upon existing versus new versus existing to be demolished. In this particular case, I have one door style for both of these doors that is on two different layers. A door existing on that one, and this one is on a door. So what I'm going to do is create a separate style for this existing one so that I can then filter it out. So I'm going to use the copy style feature in the ribbon. I'll hit copy style, and then I wait for my style manager to open. And then on the general tab, I'm going to just add existing onto the end of this name. So if you're in a firm that has good CAD management process, this may already be set up for you. Otherwise, you can kind of set this up yourself and include it in your template so that you have styles preset for existing doors, existing walls, existing windows, etc. So now I have a specific style for single hinged existing doors. I can then do the same here for my roll-up door. Now I don't have any other roll-up doors, but theoretically you could have a project where you have an existing roll-up door and a new roll-up sectional door. So I'm going to go ahead and follow the same process just to establish good habits there. Okay, so now I have those two different styles set up. I have my existing doors set on hinged single existing, and then my new doors are on hinged single. So I could theoretically also have an existing style for double doors as well to continue to sort objects by existing versus new. What I'm going to do now is get into the classifications. So I'm going to go to my Style Manager on the Manage tab of the ribbon and go to Multi-Purpose Objects, and then you'll see Classification Definitions. Right now the only one there is Structural Usage, and that normally would be applied to walls. I'm going to right click and hit New. What you name this classification is completely up to you. I'm going to call it Status. That allows me to add 2 or 3 categories like New, Existing to Remain, and then perhaps Existing to be Demolished. Won't really apply in this case, but you get the idea. So on the Applies to tab, I would select the object I would want this to apply to, which would be doors in this case. And then on the Classifications tab, I would add classifications under status. So I just hit add on the right, and then I can rename it at the bottom. So I will say new, and then I'll go back to status and hit add again, and then rename this one to be existing. It's possible to add sub-classifications, and that's why I went back to status. If I stay on new and hit add, you can see it actually adds a sub-classification under new, which was not what I wanted. So I made sure I was on status when I hit add both times so that the 2 new classifications were at the same level under status in my tree of classifications. So now I have 2 there, and all these are just kind of groups that you can sort things in, essentially. So I'm going to hit OK. Now I'm going to select the door style and do Edit Style. Go to my Classifications tab, and then I can choose the classification that I want to apply to this style. So my existing one is going to say existing, and then I can hit OK. I can do that for both of these existing styles. You can see until you specify, it says unspecified because it doesn't know which you want it to be. And then for this one, which is the new door style, I'm going to choose new. So you're basically just putting them into groups, new and existing. So now I have those classifications applied to the 4 styles. So the next step is to tell my schedule which classifications should be included and which should not. And then I go to Edit Style. And then I go to the Applies to tab. Now you can see that it says on the right classifications and it shows none available. This is a very common little error that people make. You have to make sure that your applies to matches precisely between your schedule and the classifications you've created. You can see in my schedule, it's not only doors that are checked. It has door and it has door and window assembly. So I need to make sure that that matches exactly to how I have my classifications set up. So I only checked door. I did not check door and window assembly. So I'm going to hit OK and go back to my Style Manager and go back to my status and applies to, and then I need to make sure I check the same boxes that show in the schedule so that the 2 are agreeing with one another. Now when I go back to edit my schedule style, you can see that it now shows up on the right. I didn't say that earlier because I wanted to show how important that is, that you get that right, because it didn't show up, and then as soon as I check that box and come back, it does show up. So that's very important that you double check what exactly is your schedule applying to, and then you use the same rules for that status. Alright, so now I can say I want the new to show up, so I'm checking the box, but not existing. Theoretically, I could check both boxes, but I don't. That's the whole point of this filter, is that I want only the new ones to show. So now when I hit OK, and then I update the schedule, it has dropped off those additional doors that had question marks. So the classification is what's tying these together, the schedule with which objects are included or excluded. And again, I'm using the styles to kind of sort them into those 2 categories. This is the most common way that classifications help you, is either to sort by new versus existing by demolished in that sense, or you can use it in terms of project phasing. Phase 1, scope of work, Phase 2, scope of work, Phase 3, or you can also schedule a lot of other things besides doors and windows. You can also schedule rooms, so that allows you to sort rooms into groups And you can say in this type of room, like classrooms are going to have this schedule with all the areas shown. So you can use them to manipulate your objects in many ways, especially in how they work with scheduling. Just keep in mind if you're working with external references, you're going to have your plan in one file and then your schedule probably in another file. So what that means is that you have to end up getting the same classification rules in both files, because then you apply them to the doors in your base file where the plan's drawn, and then you apply them to the schedule in the file where your schedule lives. So an easy way to do that is using the style manager. If you have more than one CAD file open at a time, it'll show each file here in your style manager. You can actually drag and drop objects between CAD files. So if I had another file open, I would just go to my classification, select status, and drag and drop that on the other CAD file, and that would copy it from the one file to the other. So in the process then, you can set up your classifications in one file, copy them over, and then that allows you to set the same rules between the file that has your schedule and the file that has your doors or your walls or whatever type of objects in it.